How are you doing today?
I'm so wonderful, Berk. I've had not enough coffee. I have extreme allergies, so everything feels wonderful.
I mean, it's 8 a.m. In New York. So we are both in New York and recording this to our friends in Turkey. Thanks, thanks so much for doing this with me. I I feel like I'm going into that sentimental part of the talk. I don't like being sentimental, but I mean, knowing you for the last 10 years, witnessing your work and collaborating with you on some of your work, it's just, I feel so lucky and privileged to know you, from closely. And so going back and rewatching some of your videos, your talks, I just remembered why I admire your work and your creativity and your childlike wonder so much. I don't know. There are, I mean, so many things to talk about.
Yeah.
I know the topic or the overarching theme is about community, how design shapes communities, and also I feel like immersive design or experiential design. We could talk about that.
Yeah. Well, they both go hand in hand, I think, too.
Yeah.
Right? Like if we make really good immersive experiences, we ultimately have to take into consideration community. And then how community gets made can also affect how immersive design is experienced. So those two things.
Yeah.
They're like natural friends.
Yeah. Maybe I'll do some intro of you to give some perspective to the audience. I mean, the modern dance and script writing is kind of like the beginning. I mean, there is probably prior to the story of that, but I think your modern dance and script writing background and your artist soul met with design, industrial design, and then forming. When I look at your career, I don't see sticking into some existing path. I think you are creating something of your own, and we're all watching that wonder and curiosity. You did when you were working as an industrial designer. You say you were much more interested in more performative, more sensory, interactive stuff. So, and then when you wrote that blog post about junk food recipes, you got a book deal, book offer. And then you designed that, you made that 51 recipes with junk food. And it's hilarious.
It's one of the more embarrassing parts of my career now, but
embarrassing in a good way. I mean,
embarrassing in the way that book is now sold, I think, for $1.49 on Amazon, so everyone can buy one now. Yeah, I think along the way, I think about that. So you're right. I started in my undergraduate degree with a focus on screenwriting and contemporary dance, and then along the way got a master's in industrial design with this focus on food as a material for design, which is where this junk food cookbook came from. And often what I say is that I have a deep passion for storytelling. That's how all these things connect. And I suppose in and of itself, that is a story about a story. But I also think I've been thinking more recently about some other underpinnings to that. And it's a real interest of the function of story, that the stories that we tell in the world are the people that we become. And then the stories that we feel are the lives that we live. And so that sense of being able to participate in storytelling at a cultural level, early on in film and dance, those are two more traditional forms of storytelling. Visual storytelling, I would call the dance embodied storytelling, using your body with others in space to tell a story. Those are really timeless forms of visual and movement-based storytelling. And then industrial design, which was specifically invented in America, so firmly entrenched in economy and in commercialism and capitalism, living and breathing in the US. It's something that you can either participate in or hide from, I think. And so that was another piece of wanting to work in storytelling and affect, again, I think more than what we do, really how we feel. I've always had that entry because, you know, our feelings, at least for me, I can't seem to escape them yet. Life point, and they really, you know, they affect so much of our personal relationships, of the way that we see the world, and that's, I think, such a human place to work. So those are really foundational motivations. And I think when we talk about, you know, how does design affect community, I think there are so many wonderful ways that design, you know, now even more through experience design, starts to build communities. And then we also now think about, as we go, you know, post function in our world almost, how we can also design emotional experiences. So not just how communities gather through design, but also how they feel, and maybe then also how they transform.
Yeah. So artists, when they enter design or technology, I feel like they have their own tools of humanity. You know, empathy, emotional connection, play, curiosity. But really, like when you look at like different disciplines, I think designers and artists are much more interested in anthropological side of, or the social side of the projects.
Yeah.
And that also affects the work of the process, you know, how we work. You know, I remember our when we worked on some projects, the work sessions were also really playful. We would work with, you know, dancers, performers to brainstorm, body storm ideas, or we would just turn our creative sessions into playful, not like effortlessly, you know, without thinking about it. So that, I think, also the community, the action of being playful and making the work fun, connects the community and makes the work fun.
Oh yeah.
I keep thinking
No,
about
that's interesting. It's not often thought formally about, that community is also process. But I would say that in today's day and age, as we are in firmly now in co-creation, I think with any kind of output, you know, especially experiential and immersive experiences, the best of them create space for agency. That means I can do something as a participant in this. I'm not just an audience. I can make active change in this experience, and even sometimes in the story, you know.
And
So
videos film is changing in that way. Sometimes they're testing how can the audience can change the storytelling in the film, or the artwork is now more interactive designs. I mean, I'm looking at your work. There was a sense like you were creating these interactive installations even before immersive design emerged as a field. You know, now museums are much more, you know, transformed across the board almost, or there's this huge trend of making things interactive. But when I look at your, you, by the way, you've done maybe 500 projects.
minimum, Berk.
I know. How?
I don't know if that's a good recipe to talk about. I think,
I mean, no, and
it's a love of making things and being alive. Like, it's so, I've always had the feeling that it's so short to be here, you know.
right, and it's not the quantity either. I mean, any single project you did also has this profound quality, not only visual, but also semantic and intellectual. You know, you talk about this stuff, and even if you don't talk about it, once you immerse yourself in the experiences, you kind of get the thinking behind it. And you're not only good with, as I said, design and performance and creativity, but also language. And you said, you quote someone about you're limited to our. You remember the language limits our thinking, or
the limits of our language are the limits of our world.
Yeah.
Einstein. Yeah.
And so that is absolutely could be observed in your work, but one doesn't need to have a certain language to enjoy your work either. You know, your work is very much timeless and
Yeah.
You know, universal.
Well, you know, and this is something that we may all as humans wrestle with at times, right, is an ability and an inability to express ourselves and communicate something to another person. And I grew up in two cultures between France and America. And though I am bilingual, my father was not. He spoke American, my mother spoke French. The result was that my brother and I spoke both languages really well, because that was the right way to teach us. But, you know, we were always therefore in the business of translating as young people. And that wasn't laborsome in any way. Like, I don't have a negative experience of it, but I did see the role that language played very early on and felt it early on, and was constantly assimilating into different cultures and translating them back and forth, back and forth. And that creates a kind of permeability in me. And so when I think about language, I don't think about words and the written word, right? I think more about the experiences that we go through as people that can instill a certain sense of meaning in us. And in my own work, you know, the like overproductivity of it has a lot to do with, as I said, like my true love of living. Like I love making things. I love it. And I can think of nothing better to do with this short time. Mm-hmm. And then the other piece of it is that I've had the incredible gift and privilege of being able to do things that gave me meaning in my life. And that was a motivation unlike anything else. Mm-hmm. Because every project was an exploration of some kind of language of trying to understand how to communicate this feeling, you know, how to be closer to myself, and in myself be closer to the world and closer to connection. And I think that's also a very universal experience, whether we're working as artists or creatives. I don't think that matters. You know, this just happens to be what I got to do in this little short period. But that real desire to fine tune and to try to understand, which there is no understanding either. Yeah. But and as an attempt over and over to try to describe the experience of life, you know, that can be really addictive too, you know?
Yeah, I do want to demonstrate a little bit of your, like, how someone would witness you if they were in our design community in New York, mm-hmm. and if they were, you know, if they knew you in person. So Emilie, you could see Emilie creating a dinner party that doesn't have any plates. You eat with your hands directly from the plate or the table. Or the table is three-dimensional with spandex, or the table is, the food is in ice. It's just all sorts of different experiences that talks to five senses. And so you could see Emilie first creating these, designing these, and then taking pictures of the prototypes, working with a florist, working with, you know, ice people. I'm sure
I love the ice people. So much about large format ice in New York City. Yeah. You know, I have a love of the dinner party, Berk. You're totally right. That was a typology. Long ago, this wonderful American designer, Russell Wright, in the like 1950s and 1960s, who really did, you know, he was like the first Martha Stewart, we can call him that. And so much more. But he stated that the table was the stage for the daily dramas of life. And you know, I would be a fool to not say that a lot of my interest in human behavior also stems from my own psychological investigations, you know. And one of the things in any kind of relationship building is the role of drama. Like what does it serve, you know?
Being intimate.
Yeah, and going through a certain role that you expect of yourself and another person. And so what I have always, maybe even more subconsciously at first, but now more consciously, is how do we start to shift those roles and just open up possibilities? And so the table, for example, the dining table, universally is a place where often we gather maybe once, twice, 3 times a day and perform the same task. And that is a repetition that ingrains in us like a muscle memory of how we behave. And cultures have always used, you know, the eating experience to create cultural values and codes. Almost every culture around the world, you look at how they eat, you also look at how they behave. Right. And so these projects, you know, the dining projects, which originally were the foundation of my career, were really were cultural investigations in terms of like, what does it mean to eat in America? Because what does it mean to be American in ways that are non-traditional, you know? And then also on a higher level, what is it, how can we create more possibility in our way of being in the everyday, you know? How can creativity be introduced to be able to not just think about new ways of being, but really feel them? And so the dining table proved also to be very fruitful for that.
Yeah, but also imagine different ways of interacting.
Exactly.
Imagine different social contracts, because we don't often talk about social contract.
Yeah, it's a beautiful
as a medium to design on, you know.
Yep.
We take it granted, we feel like it's not like it cannot be changed. But social contract is something that we collectively design and we don't really think often. But it could be redesigned, it could be changed. You know, your dinner tables remind me of, you know, that that is, as you know, it's so possible to work on these things and offer new ways of interacting. And intimacy, I feel like it's also such a pillar or central thing in your work. That reminds me of Miranda July, which you introduced to me.
She's the best.
Yeah, I feel like there's something overlapping with the childlike curiosity in play, and then not being ashamed of, you know, your humanity, and the desire to connect with one another, not being so precious about, you know, because there might be some dinner tables that you don't really get upset, like families don't get upset at each other, don't share their feelings, you know, they don't raise their voices. I mean, intimacy doesn't necessarily happen in anger level, but, you know, or they don't express how much they love the food or how much they love each other. But when you eat an ice cream, and then when the ice cream is all over your face, and you're really, you know, interacting with the ice cream with all your five senses, I think there's a similarity to interacting with people like that too. You get involved, you get, you know, you show yourself, you let the other person show themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think the point I really latch onto there is not, I think you said not being afraid of your humanity or embarrassed by your humanity or something.
Yeah.
And I think those are very, very rich experiences to build community around. Because if we're in spaces that have slight amount of tension or awkwardness, but we can hold them, you know, through beauty, through story, whatever the container is, you get to another level with other people when you have a shared experience like that, you know. And there is a rawness of it, you know, and I hope to be Miranda July when I grow up. I don't think I ever will. But she's a great example of that, you know, of really through performance being able to illustrate like a relationship to all of the kind of awkwardness and beauty and play and wonder that we have as people at all times. It's a big myth that like the goal is perfection and ease. Like, in my opinion, that's not at all real. I think I seek now experiences that are more real, you know, which is a charged word as the metaverse arrives. But I think that those qualities of friction, like I have this project, the Lickable Ice Cream Orchestra, which you know quite well.
Orchestra.
Yeah, the Lickestra, which was made also with one of our colleagues a long time ago at the School of Visual Arts, Carla Diana.
Yeah.
But that project, you know, it started out as an exploration in food and technology. How could we transform ice cream cones into microphones was the idea. Really, I think also became a piece of human performance, because how the thing works is that you lick ice cream, and by licking it, you trigger music. And so you play together through the licking of these ice cream cones. And you do that in public in front of a lot of people. And it treads in so many different codes because it's the most childlike thing that we do, you know. We're always putting things in our mouth when we're kids. Ice creams are sort of the nostalgic childhood food of so many cultures also. But here you are licking in public and licking performatively, which for the sake of this conversation, we're not going to dig into that meaning anymore. But we can all imagine also what that's like on stage, right? And so you have this, you have this vulnerability.
How sensual they get. And that's a part, you know, that's also natural. That's also human, that we don't, you know, sometimes in some cultures we want to, you know, oppress or suppress. But it's humanity, you know, they like the sensuality comes from licking
And it's interesting that you use that word. Like, I've never thought of that as a sensual project. I think of it more as, which of course it is, it almost functions for me when I see it as permission for the participants to explore something in public that they don't, usually people don't explore, right? So that is also an interesting role of provocation or of slight tension and performance, I think.
But sensuality is often, I think, mixed up with sexuality. I feel like, I mean, when I was in the movement, because I'm also trained in performance, but I'm trained in acting, but we had movement, and in movement we talked about sensuality a lot. And I think my understanding of sensuality was just not being guarded and kind of being okay with the enjoyment, and it could be, the enjoyment of the air or the senses, being open to your senses, I guess.
Yeah. Well, fully living, if every mindfulness coach will ever tell you, or training, to focus on the sensory experience and to be here. I think we need that more than ever too, especially as we build our relationships with other people. How do we create more presence together? If we can really focus on the experience in hand and not just think about it, but really feel it, we are more here then.
Yeah. You kept working on different things. I did keep working on different things. I worked on some robotics and technology products. But then I think exhibition design for museums or installations is kind of becoming more focal in your work, right? Although you can find Emilie filming a pilot for space food with, and we need to talk more about this, but one cannot contain you in one container. You're an uncontainable creative soul.
Not yet, coming soon, don't worry. Age is catching me. Yeah.
No.
I think the shifting of typologies, has always been, I've never understood why, like, being a person means so many things, right? Yeah. We are so many different people, naturally. The idea that we have a fixed identity, I think, is harmful. It helps us, and that's always been something that my rampant creativity wants also to learn. Like, I love to learn things. So I like to be in new spaces so I can learn. That, of course, isn't, it's some adrenaline and also a lot of education. And I like to grow for that reason. And so those were things of challenging and introducing some free thinking into what it means to have a path of an artist, of a designer, of a boundary blur. And that's also not new. Like, I think folks have been doing this for a long time, in multimedia. Like, many of the great artists maybe got known for one thing, like painting, but if you look at their whole body of work, we're incredible illustrators and children's book authors and sculptors, ran restaurants,
Right.
So I think that it's freeing sometimes to think about how else the essence of us shows up, just as a practice, because it's more than ever also, our careers are not linear, right? The world evermore is ever changing.
Nothing is
so and how we can create resilience in that.
Chaos.
Is really important. Yeah, who knows where
the universe.
That's weird. Those will be my robot child here soon, but those are things, again, like how to deal with the human condition is something that, like, my work has really almost always served that purpose for me. How to negotiate the awkwardness, the joy, the discomfort, the questions of being alive. I think that's it was very meaningful for me to be able to do that, and then, going from more product-based work, which you called out, the Lycostra, I've made these cotton candy theremins also, and then moving more into exhibition design and full-on experience design was an expansion of that, of like how now that the objects I've always thought of as the props, right? In the theater of life, these objects that we make as trained industrial designers serve a purpose, and that purpose is some kind of interaction, right? And I love the language that you put to it of social contracts, So what happens when we start to expand that and it becomes more explicitly about the relationship, the contract involved? And that object then becomes part of a larger story. It's the prop.
That makes me think of the classic, the stereotypical designer with the object that they design. And then, I mean, I probably gave that pose with some of my designs, but, the object and the designer pose, it's like the objects, the glorified on pedestal.
Yeah.
But I think the more you get involved with humanity and experiences of life, the object becomes more of a tool, an instrument, not necessarily the centerpiece.
Exactly.
So in order to come from the material world and a world that we co-created, that we all glorify, not all, but there's this, shared culture of glorifying things. And then now ideas, brands, or labels, I read this thing about the 20th century was about what belonged to who, and the 21st century is about who belongs to what.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's
much more immaterial, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we don't collect objects anymore. We collect experiences.
Right.
And, it's incredibly powerful. The best objects are also the best experiences too. Let's not forget that. But I don't think it necessarily like pushes out the material world in any way, but there is a real need for belonging now. Also post-pandemic, I think that's the symptom of the world.
Right.
You're experiencing such extreme isolation and loneliness. How do we belong again? It really shows the power of social experiences and community. In a way, I think is more than social experience. Obviously, there's some meaning and shared value set. There's a purpose to it in a lot of ways. Yeah. And that, I think, is something that is applied not consistently as we think about experience design. Is really the community building is more than just getting people together in a room and like pushing buttons on a fun interactive screen. What's the purpose of being together? What's the meaning that we take away? How do we create a sense of belonging? How do we articulate shared values and then enact them and allow people to meet each other? What do we do after the experience to continue that? Those, I think, are questions for now, because there's also, I think, a political and sort of an urgency to that as we look at the great problems of the world, and right. We don't know if we'll change them. We don't know if we'll win at climate change, right?
Yeah, we don't know.
No.
It's a part of the thing that we need to accept, that we don't know. But we can be a part of, we could do something.
Be nice to each other.
Be nice to each other, that's the bare minimum.
Be nice to each other and slow down. I think anything that we can do to slow the constant need for change, which is a totally hypocritical and ironic thing to say after being like, I'd love to make things all the time.
But no one is asking you, most of your projects you're experimenting things out of, pure curiosity and your self-exploration, self-research project. Yeah. And then people see it and people are like, do this for us too. A museum says that, a brand says that, and now you're working for one of the largest architectural and experience design companies, and you're a creative director.
Yeah.
Do you want to quickly maybe share what is coming next for you, or what are you working recently?
Oh, so many things. I mean, I work within Gensler right now, so I can talk about nothing. So, but things, I'll share with you things that I'm interested in. I'm really interested in creating more lexicon around immersive experience design. Mm-hmm. So it goes beyond just projected visuals, and the built environment that you walk into another world. Because as I said, the transformative power of creating immersive experiences, I think, is really like hugely important right now. Mm-hmm. And within that, I don't also think that immersive experience needs to or should be thought of only as like a sales tool for the newest museum show or museum of touring experience. I think it's really now been firmly implanted in entertainment. And I would love to start to expand research and understanding of how the principles of immersive design, of creating agency, also themes like inclusion and accessibility, can apply to all areas of our life. And within that, it's specifically, I think right now, community spaces are essential in the real world and online. And there's so many principles from experience design and immersive experience design that can help craft containers for community, and then also actions and agency for people to, again, be able to hopefully, feel a sense of belonging in meaning. And again, those are very, philosophical statements, perhaps, maybe too abstract, but I know in my life, that's what I'm craving, right? Is a sense of belonging, is a sense of community. And that, as always, is going to be motivation for me, because I'm just a single person who's probably feeling what a lot of other people feel too,
Yeah.
But it also gives meaning to my life, and that's something that will help it be a better place for me to live in.
That was beautifully said. The immersive design for museums, I'm also, maybe I shared with you earlier, maybe a couple months ago, that I've been working on this art and science campus for Ankara, Turkey. And that the process of it involving storytelling, so that when people come into it, they have a role and they are part of a story, not necessarily a bunch of cool interactive stuff, not necessarily just a playground, but a playground where you actually, when you leave something, you leave with something with you. You have an experience that kind of hopefully transformed you, what you would expect from a good movie or theater production or a novel. So I like how you said, how do we bring these into the other parts of our life and other parts of our experiences? And that makes me think of service design and the components of service design. There's so much to talk about. The time is
I know. Till next time, we'll have a series of all of these. Yeah. Yeah. It's such a pleasure to be able to even think about it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for being you, and thank you for all the work you're doing.
Right back at you. Yeah, it is a real delight, as always. You've consistently been just a true inspiration, Berk. So thank you.
Thank you, Emilie.
Yeah.